that would be the con. Less control, less creative, less autonomy.
The $5 footlong Subway. That was the idea of a franchisee. That wasn't the corporate marketing department that came up with that. A lot of people say that the $5 footlong saves Subway.
Maybe I'm oversimplifying here, but I look at a franchise as they're going to give you answers to 90+% of the questions of the situation that you need to resolve or decide about before you start a business and throughout the process of operating the business.
Great ideas are part of the franchisor reaching out to franchisees.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Business Growth Pod. As always, Alan Draper, I'm your host. Happy to have you. Thankful that you're here with me. If you get a second, one way that you could say thank you for our guests, for our content that we put out, go ahead and leave me a review on whatever platform you're listening to this on. Also, make sure to hit the subscribe button so that you get notified when I drop new episodes. Today, I am excited to welcome Scotty Milas. Scotty has been an entrepreneur dating back to his teen years, actually, where he started small businesses, mowing lawns, raking leaves, and shoveling snow. This sounds familiar to me. In his early 20s, he began a career with a major news organization as a cameraman for the White House Press Corps. Several years later, Scott could not ignore the calling of his entrepreneurial spirit, and so he left the news industry to pursue a career in business. That sounds intriguing. We'll have to get into that a little bit. Scotty, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and your audience.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about that entrepreneurial spirit that you have. It sounds like you started really young. I was the same way. Go door to door with my lawnmower, offering to mow people's lawns, rake their leaves, whatever. What is it? What is it that makes up that entrepreneurial spirit?
I guess the easiest way and the most humble way to put it is that I just did not like school. I just, my mother and father. My mom has since passed, but my father, I love them dearly, love my mother, but, they pressed education. And for me, it was all about business, just kind of, putting my hands on the oven. And if it was hot, I knew not to put my hand on the oven again. So, and that all started really in my, when I was 8, 9 years old, I got hooked up with an Italian family. I grew up in New York. And they owned a pizzeria restaurant. So I started working for them and they nicknamed me Gino. And I just fell in love with the restaurant business. So that's really where business came. And of course, there was different directions from there. But it was really just didn't like school. It just wasn't for me.
So it's an interesting point. I have 3 small children, 4, 8, and 10. And I get the question a lot. I hear Allan, and I actually have a law degree. So I went to my fair share of school that I use occasionally, but I don't practice law anymore full time. So I get the question like, hey, are you going to tell your kids to go to school? And I think, and I wanted to get your feedback on this, but for me, I'm going to tell them to go to school if they want to go after a particular industry that requires school, right? You can't be a veterinarian unless you go to school, get licensed, whatever. It can't be a physician. Now, part of the problem with that line of thinking is you don't know if you want to be a veterinarian until you're a veterinarian. Like you can volunteer and you can kind of see what they do a little bit, and that will give you some experience. But I did not know what it was like to be a lawyer until I was actually a lawyer practicing law. And I worked for law firms. I was in law school for several years, obviously. So that's kind of my take on it is if you have this course that you want to pursue, but I think with certain people, definitely with my parents, it was almost like a badge of honor, Scotty, for them to say, yeah, my son just graduated from college. And it's like, okay, I get that to some extent. But now with the cost of school, how much you're missing out in terms of just experience, right? Like just real world experience during that 4 years. And then, how much you're missing out on being actually paid. I don't know that it's worth it just to say, yeah, go to school, get a bachelor's of arts and, medieval studies or something, right?
Right, right. It's interesting. I over this past weekend, I was speaking at a conference, expo conference, and we were talking about business ownership. And one of the things that I talk about is education and putting yourself in a position to learn. And we were talking about education from college or high school and elementary school. And my point was to the audience is that we don't go to school and are taught that we should open our own business. We're taught that we should go learn and go out and get a job and work for somebody else. And I always kind of question the fact why we're not taught more in education about business ownership, going out and being able to start your own business with all this information and knowledge that you're learning in school. I'm not anti-school. It just wasn't for me. But it's, my father was an attorney. He wanted that badge of honor to tell, he had a son that was, working in the firm or taking over some of his trust, but, it never happened. And I think it took him about 35, 40 years to figure out that I wasn't going in that direction and to figure out what I actually do. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. And I think, with education and how it relates to business, if you want to be a successful business owner, entrepreneur, whatever, the best way to do it is to do it. Now there's some great coaches out there. There's some people that know some things. I, just had an interview and somebody was telling me about how their life got disrupted, their business got disrupted by COVID, like a lot of people. But they still had this foundation of, hey, I had been doing it for 2 decades before that. So I didn't start from zero. I took a couple of steps back, but I didn't start from zero. So there are some resources out there. There's books, great podcasts, things like that to help entrepreneurs. But it's really tough to replace that, that experience that comes from just doing something. You agree with that?
I agree. I tell people that it's a lot harder in business to fail than it is to be successful. So, but being successful does take a lot of work. I learned one of the first things that I learned in the first business, real business outside of mowing lawns or whatever. And my father kind of preached this to me is that numbers don't lie. Your balance sheet, your P&L, is a true indication unless you're putting in the wrong numbers. So there's a lot to know, but the beauty about business ownership, at least in the aspect where I come from, in that kind of franchising world, is that you don't have to be an expert at what you're doing. You just got to be able to manage and delegate the systems and the best practices within the organization, within the franchising system. So I've done it all. I mean, I've been a franchisor, I've been, a franchisee in some ways, and I've been an independent. There are equal challenges.
I think it's really cool that you have that experience. You've seen it from all different types of angles, because I've thought about this a little bit, and I'm actually working on, there's a franchise that I'm a huge fan of that I'm trying to bring to Arizona. But all of my businesses, I've started, a lot of them with partners, but we started from scratch. And I think there's pros and cons to, being on both sides of the franchise situation and also just starting something. And I think it's important for entrepreneurs to know that going into it. And there are a lot of things about a franchise, even though I don't own one yet, but I can imagine there's so many things because I've started a business on my own from scratch, and a franchise, it like fast forwards you, right? Yep. As I've been investigating this one particular franchise, it's like, okay, oh, wow, they already have all of the products. This is a restaurant actually. So the menu, all of that, recipes, all of that is already laid out. So if I were to start a restaurant versus, going into business with a franchise, it's like, okay, I have all of those answers. I have the software system answered. They show me how to hire. They show me what my logo is. I have the name, all those things, which is a huge benefit for somebody that doesn't really want to deal with that aspect of it.
The best analogy that I can give the audience about the difference between being an independent and look, I have a lot of respect for independents, people that have started businesses, developed the systems, the manuals, the best practices, you name it. But the best way to put about a franchise and investing in a franchise in that business model, if you're a sports fan, you're starting on third base and going home, or you're kicking the extra point and not worrying about getting a touchdown. So there's a lot of, depending on the brand, I mean, and that's what we coach people through at my, consulting organization, is the validation, checking on the systems, the support levels, is that you're starting on third base, and it's a lot easier than developing all the systems. But there are people that want to develop all the systems. I tell people that if you want to open your own restaurant, that's great. And if you want to get up in the morning and make a soup and serve it, you can. In a franchise, you're not going to be able to wake up in the morning and decide that you want to serve a soup or make a hamburger a different way. So that's the difference.
And that would be the con, in my opinion, is the lack of, and some franchises, I know you have more control than others, but there's going to be less control, less creative control, less autonomy than you would have with your own startup. So I look, and maybe I'm oversimplifying here, but I look at a franchise as, look, they're going to give you answers to 90+% of the questions of the situation that you need to resolve or decide about before you start a business and throughout the process of operating the business. But then the other side of the scale is, because they give you those answers, there's not a lot of wiggle room.
Yep.
If you want a new recipe, you have a new soup that you want to create, then maybe a franchise isn't for you.
Correct.
Because you're going to be able to implement that stuff. Because one of the main values of a franchise, in addition to them providing information and the systems, which is huge. That's huge coming from somebody that started several businesses from the ground up. The other thing is the continuity and brand recognition. So you can't, and it makes sense to me. It makes sense that if you're a hamburger joint, that you're not going to be serving fried chicken, right? That makes sense, because the brand needs to be protected, so that when people go, McDonald's, for example, I used to live in South America, and I'd go to McDonald's. It's the same logo, same packaging, same food in another country. Love it or hate it, they've got it down, where it's consistent.
Yep. Well, the other thing to think about franchising is that, great ideas are part of the franchisor reaching out to franchisees, but the franchisee who's coming up with that idea or wants to change something has to understand that change has to be good for the complete system. It can't be just good for them. A perfect example, I mean, take it or leave it, is the $5 footlong, with Subway. I mean, that was the idea of a franchisee. That wasn't the corporate marketing department that came up with that. So that was implemented.
Really?
I mean, look what it did to Subway. A lot of people say that the $5 footlong, even though it had its challenges, eventually saved Subway. But there's a lot more to franchising than the $5 footlong or the golden arches. So, but great ideas do work, but they do take time to implement, and they have to work through the system.
Now, a lot of people think that franchises are bulletproof, and that's not the case, right, Scotty? There are cases where a franchise in a particular location, even though it's successful in other locations, it won't work out. Well, why is that?
Well, I can tell you and not to blame franchisees versus franchisors, but a large percentage of franchises franchisees fail because they're not following the system. They're trying to reinvent the wheel. They want to, fly the plane a different way. That's the best way to do it. I mean, I always use the analogy, when you're flying a 747, there's only one way to fly it. You can't get up there and say, well, I'm going to try something different, because it's just not going to work. So, people fail in franchising because they're not following the process. They fail because they're undercapitalized. They fail because their thinking is that the franchisor is supposed to be doing everything for them, and that's not the case. But then franchisors fail or lead to franchisee pain because greed sets in. They just want more and more. They want to take a piece of the pie from everything. I am a firm believer that franchisors, if you cannot, pay your bills and be successful based on the royalties that you're collecting, you should not be in franchising. You should not be a franchise. So, those are some of the reasons. But, people that are undercapitalized, not following the process, franchisors that, are greedy and, are constantly trying to train or not providing support to their franchisees. That's why franchising failed.
That's interesting, because one of the reasons was because they wanted more control than the franchisor. And then another reason was they wanted less control than they have than the franchisor, right? They thought the franchisor was going to do more than they did. But that does offer some, promise for somebody that's looking into a franchise, where it's like, look it, capitalize yourself properly, do basically what you're expected. Don't necessarily do more. Don't do less. Just do what you're expected. Is there anything that's to be said about the location?
Yes, absolutely.
Because that's going to be different than from the other stores, right? The location is going to be different. Lots of other things are going to be same, almost all of them, but the location's different.
Right.
So how does a franchisee say, okay, I'm looking to put in a store in this location. You've had success in these other locations. How do they set themselves up for success with that specific decision?
Well, all franchisors, at least, if you're looking at brick and mortar business models, franchises, you are going to have to trust the franchisor and the real estate department or the company they're contracting with to make sure that they're helping you find and working with you to locate what I call an A location. Now, the A location is one thing, but then you get into lease negotiations. So it's important that the franchisor is involved in the lease negotiations. So if you can dot all your I's and cross your T's on the location, that it's an A location. I'll give you an example of a poor location. I remember when we were building a burger concept that I was involved with, one of our potential franchisees came to us and said, we want to open this location in this particular spot, in this particular town. But when we did our homework, it was a burger concept that had already failed and left. And we said, well, why would you go there? It already proven that it won't work. And there were some certain things about the traffic pattern, and our real estate department was trying to explain this, but they insisted on going there. So typically it boils down to the franchisee has the final say. So long story short, they did go there. And 6 months later, we had to get them out of the lease and renegotiate a new lease and move them. So it's really working with the franchisor to find that A location. And it's like I tell anybody, if there's any doubts, keep looking. That's all. I mean, don't try to put a square peg in a round hole.
So tell me about what you do, what your role is with I know that you're a franchise coach. Tell me how you help out. Are you on the franchisor side, the franchisee side? I'm
square in the middle, I guess, is the best way to put it. There are two parts to my company. The first part is Scott Milas, franchisecoach.com. And that is a consulting organization where I help people research and explore business ownership. So I take individuals, whether they've been displaced out of corporate America, looking to transition out of corporate America. I do a lot of work with existing multi-brand, multi-unit operators, franchisees already, who I help diversify their portfolio. But in a nutshell, what I do is I help people determine what their why is. I help them on a better understanding of what their skill sets are, what they're good at, what they don't want to do. How many moving parts do they want? Do they want brick and mortar? Don't they want to work from home, B2B, B2C? I take that, an hour to 2 hours of consultation, put a business model together, and then introduce them to the brands that fit and help them through the process making sure that they're asking the right questions to make a validated decision at some time down the road. Because in franchising, there's eventually a decision you have to make, and it's not maybe, it's either yes or no. So a validated decision versus an emotional decision. The process that we work with and I work with for my clients, can take anywhere from 90 to 120 days before someone's going to make that validated decision. And then I help on the financing side, help people. I have a financial consultant that I pay for my clients to speak to get a better understanding of what they would qualify in funding, how the best way to fund their startup is. And then there's the legal side, making sure that they're getting their documents reviewed by a franchise attorney, understanding their responsibility, the franchisor's responsibility, and just kind of, really solidify that decision.
So then is your fee paid by the franchisee?
No, my fee is paid by the franchisor or the brand. I have over 600 brands that are in my portfolio, all different categories, all different investment levels. So once that client of mine signs their agreement, pays their franchise fee, the franchisor that the brand they invested in pays me a fee for helping them bring someone to
finder's fee. Yeah. But it's nice that you have 600 options.
Yes. Yep.
Right?
And growing. And growing. Yeah. The industry is really.
So it's not like you're just trying to cram somebody into the two options that you have.
Yeah. I mean, look, I told somebody last week that, this is an exercise in futility, and that, they really should just not go into a franchise. If you want to do an independent business, that's something you can look into, but a franchise is not for you. It's just not going to work. It's just, you don't have the right mindset, and there's a mindset to owning a business. I mean, as you said in the beginning, it isn't all, it isn't all roses and ice cream. So there's some thorns on that rose bush.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. And what's funny is that we always talk about entrepreneurship and starting a business like that, but there's also thorns on the rose bush of not doing it.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
It's like, would you rather work for somebody or do, 9 to 5, like not have flexibility, not, whatever. And there's some great jobs out there.
Oh, yeah. Look,
that. And I don't think everybody should be an entrepreneur.
Right.
I really don't. There's some people that, like my mom, for example, she, when 5 o'clock hit, it was like the old, like Flintstones cartoon. Yeah. The yabba dabba doo, he's sliding down the dinosaur tail. Work was over. If that's your personality, don't start a business.
Right.
Because the business doesn't, and you do have to find time to unplug. I just spent a week in Florida with my family and, unplugged quite a bit, but that it's mostly upstairs. That's the tough part to turn off.
Right.
And what's interesting is, as an attorney, I struggled much more with shutting it off after I left the office than I do as an entrepreneur.
Yep.
I just let stuff go now, but as an attorney, I don't know why. I think that just comes down to my personality.
Right.
So there are some people that it should be for, that starting a business is for, and some that it's not. Now, if somebody is considering a franchise, what are some questions that you ask, or how do you filter whether a franchise is right for them or maybe not?
That's a great question. My first question to my clients is that if you found the right business opportunity and you invested in it 5 years from now, and let's just say you're successful, how would your life be different? So we kind of work from that platform. Where are you going and what do you want to do? I mean, you don't go out and invest, $100,000 or $500,000 or $1 million because you don't like your boss. There's got to be something of a change, or what you're looking for, whether it's work-life balance, you want to be home more, you want to take more days off, you only want to work 2 days a week, you want to build the legacy, you want to build wealth. So we start with that question, and then we eventually get into exit strategies. What are you looking to do when when your time is up? What's your exit strategy? Do you want to build something that you could sell? Or do you just want to, have something and then be able to turn it off and walk away from it? Because there are certain businesses, I'm in one of them. I'm in a consulting business. I own my own consulting company. My business can't be sold. I'm not building anything that somebody can buy, because my business is based on relationships and building those relationships and referrals. So if that person who buys my business isn't going to get those because nobody's going to refer somebody they don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But if you're building a brick and mortar or a service-based business and you build it up to locations, then you have something to sell. So exit strategy, work-life balance, what kind of hours do you want to work? What kind of employees do you want? There's what we call the hourly employee. Then we talk about the skilled labor part of it. So there are a lot of aspects that we talk about to get somebody to start looking at and talking to franchisors that potentially are an interest. And my goal is to take people outside of their box a little bit, get them a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then we talk about ego. I mean, because let's face it, there are some people that want to be able to sit at the dinner table when they're out with friends and tell everybody that they have this kind of business. They don't want to tell people that I have a business and I'm in the portable toilets business. So there's an ego side of it that we have to talk about as well.
That's funny. So I own a group of pest control companies. One of them's in Massachusetts, where you're located. I own a pest control company in Boston, services Boston and the Metro West area. And it's not the sexiest business, but I'm just telling you, it is an incredible, incredible business. So I don't have any problem telling people I'm a bug guy. And I love that.
Well, there are people that would be. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. We just have to find that, that business that kind of fits into all aspects of what they're looking for. I don't believe in perfection. I don't believe there's a perfect business, but there is an ideal business that fits comfortably. And then the big one we have to talk about, and you'll probably chuckle about this, is sales aptitude. Because there are people that don't like to be in front of other people. There are people that don't like to network. I'm not talking about Willy Loman knocking on doors or cold calling. What I'm talking about is networking, making a presentation. And if you don't like that and don't want to hire somebody to do it for you, then you probably got to lean towards retail. People are coming to you. So sales aptitude is another big one.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a really good point, because when you start a business, regardless of the structure, it's going to be difficult, right? It's a lot like a marriage where, marriage is difficult. It is. Any type of long-term relationship is difficult. It requires work. It requires persistence. It requires not giving up and all these things. So you might as well get some things out in front that align, right? Marry somebody that, whatever it is, religion is super important to you. That's a really important one. You align with financial decisions, things like that. You're still going to have some concerns come up down the road.
And
you're still going to have those.
You're going to disagree. You're absolutely right.
You're going to disagree. There's going to be something come up with business. You want to put those big rocks in the jar. Hey, I don't necessarily want to be out in front of people. I don't want to be in the bug business, because you're still going to have your share of concerns and issues. But if you get those big ones, I agree with you, Scotty. I think that's a great point. Try to get as many of those things figured out, in a marriage too. Try to get those figured out as much as you can, and then, address the other issues that come as they certainly will.
Yep. Nope. You're spot on that. That's having spousal support, partner support is also very important. It's I always challenge my the couples I'm working with that sit down at the dinner table after the kids are in bed, whether it's a cup of coffee or a bottle of wine, each of you grab a piece of paper, a legal sized piece of paper, and each of you write down what you think the other's responsibilities are going to be within the business. And I said it's going to open a lot of you may need another bottle of wine by the time you get through figuring it all out, but it's an important part of the process. So, and I always tell people, look, if you both can't agree on the business, walk away and find something you can agree on. It's too many times businesses, well, I shouldn't say too many times, but there are times when businesses have really impeded families and have made it difficult for families to function.
No, 100%. And that reminds me of Stephen Covey's concept of win-win or no deal. Like it's either going to work for both of you, or, you agree to find something else or not do it. So, well, This has been great, very insightful, Scotty. Where can people reach out to you if they want to learn more about franchises or any other questions they might have about the show?
Well, you can go to my website, scottmilasfranchisecoach.com. You can also visit my podcast channel, allthingsconsideredfranchising.com. We're also on Spotify, all the rest of the podcasts. You can reach out to me at scott@scottmilasfranchisecoach.com. Email me or just give me a call, 860-751-9126. Believe it or not, I still talk to people on the phone. So haven't sold a franchise through emails yet, so I don't think I will.
Makes sense. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Scotty. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes, and best of luck.
Thank you very much. It's been great being here.
If you have enjoyed today's podcast, please leave us a rating. And for daily inspiration and business tips, follow Allan on Instagram. Until next time, remember, we build the future one entrepreneur at a time.